Just as the gardener plays with the pH of the soil to get the right colour flower, you can play with the pH of your soil, cell, to create different health and sicknesses conditions in the body. Cancer loves acid. The other thing cancer loves is sugar.
Dr. Barbara O'Neill is a famous health expert known worldwide. She strongly supports holistic and natural health, with many testimonials backing her methods. In our last video, Dr. Barbara discussed alkaline-forming foods that can starve cancer. Today, she will explain acid-forming foods that can promote cancer growth. Before we dive into the foods that may lead to cancer, let's take 30 seconds to grasp the concept of acid and alkaline balance.
Acid scale, it's 0, alkaline, it's 14, and in the middle, 7 is neutral. Blood has a reading on the pH scale, and blood's reading on the pH scale is between 7.35 and 7.4. It will always be within that range. If blood pH does go up to 8, that person will go into a coma and die of alkalosis. If blood pH drops down to 7.22, that person will go into a coma and die of acidosis. So there cannot be much variation there, and we don't need to worry about the pH of our blood because there are two organs that are constantly keeping it within that range. One is your lungs, and this explains why you start breathing very deeply when you exercise. We don't choose to breathe deeply, do we? But when we're getting to the top of that hill, you're starting to breathe very deeply, especially if you run up the hill. Well, why does that happen? Well, the cells need more oxygen. Remember, more oxygen gives you a better delivery of fuel. Plus, as the oxygen and the glucose are being burnt, they're giving off carbon dioxide. They're giving off carbon dioxide, and that has to be got rid of. Because if it doesn't, the carbon dioxide builds up in the blood, and that creates a more acid environment. So that is why we start breathing deeply. So deep breathing helps to keep the balance of the pH in the blood as it should be.
The body puts in a lot of effort to keep a balance between acid and alkaline levels, which is known as the pH level. Certain foods can raise the acidity in the body, creating a setting that can help cancer thrive since cancer prefers acidic conditions.
Let's have a look at acid-forming foods now. These acid-forming foods are high in the acid-forming minerals, which is phosphorus, sulfur, and chlorine. So what foods are high in phosphorus, sulfur, and chlorine?
The first one is meat.
Meat in its nature, when it's broken down to food and taken into the energy cycles in your cell, is very acid-forming.
Both processed and natural meats have been recognized for their potential to create an acidic environment within the body. The amino acids present in meat contribute to elevated acid levels. Additionally, meat is rich in phosphorus, a mineral that Dr. Barbara highlighted as a contributor to acidity. Reducing your intake of red and processed meats can help lower your body's acid levels, which may reduce the growth of cancer cells.
This explains why Dr. Colin Campbell found he could turn cancer cells on and off like a switch by the amount of meat and dairy products he was giving the rats.
The second one is refined sugar.
Refined sugar, it's very acid-forming.
Consuming refined and processed sugars, like the ones found in a lot of our daily foods, can cause our bodies to become more acidic. This acidity can then result in a range of health issues by affecting how our bodies function.
The pure crystallized acid that's extracted from the sugarcane plant. A green leafy food is sugarcane. It is not acid-forming in its natural state. But when you extract that acid, called sugar, out of it.
Consuming excessive amounts of sugary foods on a regular basis can disrupt the body's ability to maintain its optimal, slightly alkaline state. Sugar is commonly found in carbonated drinks, which are often loaded with sugar. Lowering your sugar intake can assist in decreasing the acidity levels in your body, ultimately aiding in starving cancer cells.
What has an acid effect? before we go there, there's one other, is fruit. Now I've got a question mark with fruit too. Why have I got a question mark? If someone has a yeast presence in their body and they're eating a lot of fruit, the sugar in the fruit will feed the yeast. And as the yeast feeds on the sugars in the fruit, it gives off acetic acid. It gives off lactic acid. It gives off uric acid. So it basically is feathering its nest. So when a person has a yeast presence and they're eating a lot of fruit, can you see that they are feeding the problem? And they're creating the environment of 5.5 where yeast loves to live.
The next one is hybridized wheat.
The hybridized wheat, the hybridization of the wheat created a lot more of the acid-forming minerals. And in the 1950s, it was the Emma strain of wheat that was put through intensive crossbreeding. And it came up with the hybridized wheat that we know today. That hybridization of the wheat created an incredibly complex gluten or protein structure. Yesterday we looked at the starch that was changed, but today we're looking at how the hybridization process changed the gluten or the protein structure. And it's almost only a cast iron gut that can break down that very complex protein or gluten structure. That explains why so many people are gluten intolerant today.
The majority of the wheat consumed today is hybridized, which means it has undergone artificial genetic modification. This process has resulted in a more intricate gluten structure. Dr. Barbara recommends reducing our intake of hybridized wheat, as it tends to be acid-forming and may foster an environment conducive to cancer cell growth. You can find hybridized wheat in many common foods, such as bread, cakes, pizza, and pasta.
It was the 1950s that the wheat was hybridized. It was the 1970s that it went worldwide. So by the 1990s, every pasta, every pizza, every biscuit, cake, cookie, donut, cereal, bread, it's all made out of the hybridized wheat. You see, the farmers love it, and I don't blame them for loving it because they get 6 times more grain per acre. Who wouldn't like that? They've got to pay their bills. But as I mentioned yesterday, it was zoomed through to help with the starvation crisis in the world, and safety studies were never done. This explains the gluten intolerance that we see today. The 2 most common symptoms of a gluten intolerance is brain fog and bloating. I meet so many people that have brain fog and bloating, and they almost think it's normal, or it can be blamed on age. Poor old age gets blamed for so many things, isn't that true?
Hybrid wheat can lead to a quick spike in blood sugar levels, surpassing even refined sugar. This spike can negatively impact your health. By reducing the consumption of hybrid wheat, you can lower the acidity levels in your body, which in turn can help starve cancer cells. Before we move on, hit that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Heading over to number 4, aged cheese.
Aged cheese. What's the blue in the blue vein cheese? The blue in the blue vein cheese is mould. So all your aged cheese, they have their flavour because of the yeast.
Dr. Barbara explains that aged cheese is considered an acid-forming food that can lead to an acidic environment promoting the growth of cancer cells. Cheese is a dairy product made in various flavours, textures, and forms through the coagulation of milk protein casein. It contains proteins and fat from milk, typically from cows, goats, or sheep. Nevertheless, Dr. Barbara emphasizes that fresh cheeses, such as feta and cottage cheese, do not have acid-forming properties.
Let me put a distinction here between aged cheeses and fresh cheeses. Fresh cheeses are a pH of approximately 7. So the only cheeses that don't sit under that category, the cheeses that have probably a pH of 7 would be your fresh. So that's your cottage, your ricotta.
But she warns us to be cautious when it comes to any type of cheese, as it could potentially be sourced from cows that were not properly fed or cows that were exposed to harmful chemicals.
I'm not saying that they are okay, because usually they come from cows who have not been fed right or have chemicals in them. But on the pH scale, they're not as acid.
Limiting the amount of cheese you consume in your meals can assist in lowering the acidity levels in your body, which in turn can help combat cancer cells. Number 5. Caffeine.
Caffeine, all your caffeine foods and drinks have an acid effect. And of course, caffeine usually comes hand in hand with the sugar, which certainly ups it. And remember our 2.6 Coca-Cola, that's a combination of the caffeine and the sugar.
Caffeine can be found in a variety of fizzy drinks and energy drinks, as well as being a key component of coffee. Dr. Barbara recommends reducing our caffeine consumption since it has been shown to create an acidic environment in the body. Combining caffeine with sugar might exacerbate this issue, as sugar is another food that can lead to acidity. Additionally, Dr. Barbara pointed out that caffeine can deplete magnesium and calcium levels in the body, which could have adverse effects on your health.
One of the dangers too with caffeine is that it not only has this acid effect, but it leaches calcium and magnesium out of the body. So it can be responsible for magnesium and calcium depletion in the body.
It's another good reason to consider reducing our caffeine intake. Lowering the caffeine in your diet can lower the acidity in your body, which can in turn starve cancer cells. Number 6. Alcohol and tobacco.
Alcohol is not a food, but it creates an acid environment in the body. Tobacco is not a food, but it also creates an acid environment in the body.
Many beverages today contain alcohol, a widely used substance. Smoking cigarettes is a common way to consume tobacco, which is also considered a harmful drug. Dr. Barbara advises against consuming alcohol and tobacco due to their acid-forming properties. In addition to being acid-forming, these substances are notorious for causing serious health issues such as lung and liver cancer.
Far more people die from alcohol-related diseases. Far more people die from tobacco-related diseases. And yet they're not banning tobacco or alcohol, are they?
Quitting alcohol and tobacco can lower the acidity in your body, which may help deprive cancer cells of what they need to thrive.
Alcohol breaks down in the body to acetaldehyde. And acetaldehyde is a neurotoxin. We don't want a neurotoxin. A neurotoxin is a brain killer.
So, can acid-forming foods be consumed in a healthy way? Yes, it can, through a healthy acid diet.
To maintain the cellular pH of 6.5, we need to be having 20 to 30% acid-forming foods and 70 to 80% alkaline-forming foods. That ratio will maintain the 6.5. One of the easiest ways to do it is eat more vegetables, eat more greens. Start pursuing the other grains. And little by little, without your family even realizing it, you can begin to create an alkaline environment in your family. So you can see also with the blue zone, these people that live the long life, they're eating a lot of fresh foods. If you cook the food, does it come acid? No. Whether it's cooked or whether it's raw, it doesn't change the mineral content of the food. The only time you will lose your minerals is if you cook your vegetables in water and throw the vegetable water away. Every evening we're giving you a broth and you're drinking all that vegetable water. It's very high in minerals.
To combat cancer cells, it is recommended by Dr. Barbara to establish and uphold a slightly alkaline environment within our bodies. She suggests a diet consisting of 20 to 30% acid-forming foods and 70 to 80% alkaline-forming foods. By doing so, we can maintain a pH level of 6.5, making it more challenging for cancer cells to thrive and reproduce in our bodies. So, are you going to use Dr. Barbara's teachings in your daily life? Share your thoughts with us in the comments. And that's it for today, guys. Drop a like if you enjoyed this video. And as always, stay informed, stay healthy.